Hello and welcome to the Saturday Down South podcast, a very special edition of the Saturday Down South podcast. It just meant more. This is our second edition of this. Today, number 9 Florida, number 1 LSU, 2007, Death Valley, at night. I have chills just saying that, Marler. I think you do too.
All right, so we were talking about this off air, and it was like just how awesome this is because I remember exactly where I was watching this game. It was at my buddy Sean Harrell, who doesn't listen to the podcast. It was his 21st birthday, and Uncle Chris had just gotten a pretty substantial student loan check in that I didn't understand wasn't real money, and threw a massive party at our apartment in Milledgeville. And I just remember my buddy who's like next to me all the time is Aaron Clark, who's a massive LSU fan. He was not having any fun, I will say that, for most of the night.
This game is kind of one of those best games to not be a fan for.
Yeah.
This is This is quintessential SEC. When I think of like peak regular season SEC football, like two teams competing for a national championship, you've got Tebow, you've got this team that's like defensively dominant. In LSU, just an unreal atmosphere. Like everything about this game is like peak SEC during this era where, of course, the SEC rattles off this 6 national championship in 6 years, like all that stuff, or 7 in 7 years. That's what it was. I don't know why I'm blanking on that, but 2006 to 2012, of course. And this is still kind of the early stages of this, where Florida is coming off of this national championship, and it's year 1 of Tebow as a starter, but it's still such a great rivalry game where, you know, College Game Day, of course, is in the house for this. This was their 3rd straight time facing off as top 15 teams, which is pretty amazing to think about. Like in a rivalry that doesn't happen that much. I mean, I don't know many rivalries in college football that have a streak like that. Even like Ohio State, Michigan doesn't even have a current streak like that.
Well, yeah, because Michigan sucks.
Well, Michigan's like there in the top 10, top 15, but even like because 2017 they were really bad. But
it was interesting going into the season of like for this because you have Florida that wins the national championship the year before, and they win it in. And people don't really remember this, like the start of the SEC's dominance of that whole stretch run. Like this is when that whole narrative was built. Like I grew up around this and like watching it my whole life. You didn't hear people like Keith Jackson and you know Vern Lundquist or I think Todd Blackledge was with them too. Like back in the day at CBS, you didn't hear them have that whole narrative. Like this is the SEC. It's the toughest conference in the country. It's the best players in the country. You just didn't hear that. And you know, the 2006 ended with that Michigan-Ohio State game that was like 49-42, and they were
game of the century was billed
as. Should they replay? Troy Smith won the Heisman for some unknown reason, and then they after Ted Ginn runs that opening kickoff back, they get absolutely housed by Florida. So everyone thought. I remember going into the season. I have a lot of friends that are Florida fans. Yeah, you know what? Like, this is the start of, like, when are they going to lose? Like, how are they going to lose? Because, yeah, Chris Leak was great and all, blah, 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 but we have Tim Tebow now. And the hype around this team, and you could, from an outsider, it's like, hold on, they're really young. Like, really young. Yeah. But you just kind of thought, like, it wasn't going to stop rolling.
We'll get to Tebow in a minute here when we go through our A-listers. But just to sort of set the scene, so as we often recommend with these It Just Meant More podcasts, if you want to go back, all these games are on YouTube. That's how we're able to watch these. And you know, many of you who are listening to this know how this game played out with LSU pulling off an epic comeback at the end, down a couple scores in the 4th quarter. Matt Flyn, Jacob Hester kind of rallied the troops. And they're able to pull. What a great sentence that is. What a great sentence that is.
There's a lot of star power in this game, but it's funny you say that because remember the first one we did, it was like, man, Amari Cooper and Eddie Lacy and then like Todd Gurley, and you're like, dude, Jacob Hester and Matt Flyn put the team on their back.
So Florida, because Florida was coming off of this loss to Auburn, but at the same time, with LSU coming in as the number 1 team, both of these teams still had national championship aspirations. We did not know at the time of this game how crazy 2007 was going to be. Craziest year in the history of college football.
Best season of college football ever.
But it just sort of felt like, in the build-up for this, it just sort of felt like the winner of this game was going to go on to a national championship. It had that type of feel to it.
You know what's weird, too, is that I don't remember, and I could be wrong about this, because I think that 2000 it's like from 2002 to 2000, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7, like before Bama was like above average and on actually on CBS games consistently. I don't remember if there were a lot of primetime games. So it just felt like when you rewatched it and looking at like the opening with Vern and Gary, you know, it almost felt like there was it was still a novelty. Like there was still this like new, you know, this shine on the Death Valley at night. Like what an experience. It's like now we see that every year. But it seemed pretty cool.
We'll get to this. So my favorite line of the broadcast, I'll just say it right now. When Vern opens with LSU football on a Saturday night, there's nothing quite like it in all of college football. Just the perfect set the scene atmosphere where they do the crowd shots and the place is just going absolutely bananas. Like Death Valley at night, if you want a perfect example of it, this game, everybody was ready to go, and the Tebow stuff coming in definitely played a factor. This wasn't just your typical Florida team. It's the fact that it's the defending national champions. It's Tebow, who is just growing more and more popular, and his legend is growing by the week. This, of course, being his Heisman season. Let's get into the Tebow talk because he's
Hold on, I do want to say the one thing. We got sirens, baby. It's about to be a good episode.
Let's go.
So I do want to say the thing about Death Valley, and I'm not saying this in a rude way. I think that just maybe specifically like for me, like as a Bama fan, and like that game, the Bama LSU game at night that's been the same for like 8 straight years, right? And so like I'm used to that narrative being, you know, brought up, and the whole thing about like Death Valley Night. I feel like this was like one of the first times that with a national broadcast it was on display. And what was cool about this is this is a great rivalry. Like when people talk about the cross divisional rivalries, and this one's almost always brought up, like we have to play Florida every year, we have to play LSU. That sucks. But as a fan, please don't ever change this because I love this game. And they're talking about how like we think of LSU as such a dominant program now. They bring up the point. This is the first time in, you know, decades they were ranked number 1.
First time since 1959.
Right, which is when they won, when Billy Cannon won the Heisman. So it's like it's a massive stretch. You think about LSU history, and people forget about how kind of like average that program was. But like it's also 10 years since the last time they played this rivalry in Baton Rouge.
You just took all of my I forgot about this notes. That was all right there.
No, so like I remember those things. Like because the 97 game was when Florida was coming off the national championship. They had the number 1 team in the country, and then they get upset, and it was like I just remember Steve Spurrier being like, "What in the hell just happened?" Because LSU wasn't good. They had Kevin Falk, and that was it. And Cecil the Diesel. Anyway. Sorry for ruining the broadcast.
Let's start with our A-listers. The biggest A-lister in college football in the 21st century, Tim Tebow. His first year as a starter, he obviously goes on to win the Heisman this year. And, you know, I just looking back and watching some of the plays that he makes in this game, because his passing numbers are not that great. He was like 12 of 26. He threw for a couple scores, but just not the most efficient day. Had like 67 yards rushing, whatever it was. There are some great Tebow moments in this game. So, by the way, 3rd and 1 with Tebow is an automatic. They should just move the chains.
Connor, they ran the same damn play for 4 years.
Doesn't matter.
The only team that ever stopped it was Ole Miss in 2008 when they beat him in that early game.
Tebow has that first touchdown pass, and afterwards there's the CBS cameras catch him, and it looks like he's putting he's like pushing buttons on his hand, and then he goes up to like hold his hand up to his ear like he's holding a cell phone. Gary Danielson has no idea what's going on.
Has no clue. Has no concept idea. Of like that was the best part of the direction. What did he say?
He's like letting the LSU fans know that he's here, like he's writing on paper or something like that. And it's like no, that's not what happened. So what happened was, and Tebow has since told this story. Yeah, LSU fans got a hold of his cell phone number, and they called him 24/7, round the clock that week. And Tebow, thankfully for him, he had just gotten like in the previous Christmas, he got a Razor phone. Like his brother bought him a Razor phone for Christmas. So that was the first phone where you could really see the number on the outside of it and screen calls to be able to not answer them. So all that week, Tebow was just getting calls nonstop from LSU fans, and they're like giving him death threats, and they're doing, you know, everything you could possibly do. And so Tebow is obviously playing up to that, and he's obviously like saying something along the lines of like, "Hey, give me a call now," like something like that. Tebow doesn't troll. He did the Gator chomp after the national championship touchdown to seal it against Oklahoma.
This was out of character.
This was very un-Tebow-like to do this, but I can imagine after his phone had been ringing the entire week.
LSU fans were notorious for this. They did this to Noshawn Moreno. They did this to John Parker Wilson. They did this to several players in these big games, and every single one of them did this. Like the whole, like call me, like phone call. And the worst one ever was John Parker Wilson. I was like, just. Dude, go to the sidelines. It's not cool when you do it. It's cool when Noshawn does it. It's cool when Tebow does it. Please stop, John Parker Wilson. But no, so the funny part about this was even on the replay, and you have it in the notes, LSU fans who are just, again, some of my favorite people in the world, because I feel like they're the most like me, and that's not necessarily a compliment. It's just accurate. And they start in with the F you, Tebow.
Wow.
Which can you imagine nowadays, anyone in the world joining in that chant? It was kind of warranted for what he was doing, like trying to be all brash, and even Vern says he's not very brash a lot of times. But when they were doing this, it was funny because there's an awkward moment where the CBS, where Vernon and Gary get quiet when they're kicking the extra point, and you can clearly hear him say it twice in a row, like the chant. And then for some reason, I don't know if it was like the audio levels, they're trying to turn them down, and they accidentally turn them up, it gets louder. And it's just clear as day, like, F you, Tebow. And then they're like, they're on for the extra point. I was like...
What do you do when it's so loud? I mean, there's really nothing you could do to avoid that.
I think stuff like that is great for college football. Like I know that probably sounds bad, but I mean, like, you don't want to condone it if you're on air, but like, man, it's like that. It's a funny, memorable thing that we're even talking about now, 12 years later.
Yeah, no, it was a classic moment in that game, and I'm glad that they didn't like cut to commercial right away or do something where they could mute the crowd or whatever it was, because it was such a real moment that. Early on in that game, that really spoke to how competitive it was and how heated. You could just tell on both sides. This game, I mean, as cliche as it is, it just meant a little bit more in those moments.
Yeah, I can't believe that. Maybe they didn't cut the audio out because they just kind of assumed that God was going to send a lightning bolt down to that entire section, because that is, and it was. I'm glad they got the last laugh, but like, man, y'all, when you get to the pearly gates, the first things will be brought up.
Heads up.
Remember what you said in Death Valley, boy.
Tebow's favorite target, developing into his favorite target, wasn't as prevalent in this game, and maybe that's why they had some of the struggles that they did down the stretch. Percy Harvin. Percy Harvin was, rarely do we say this about somebody in college football, but he just felt like his own breed. Somebody who was different in so many ways. This guy who was just the perfect sort of H-back fit in Urban Meyer's system to be able to run, to be able to catch passes. You leave him open in the slot. You try and watching Dan Mullen scheme ways to put Percy Harvin on linebackers was just unfair.
That when Gary Dennison broke down at one point in like the first or second quarter, he breaks down. They're talking about Percy Harvin, and again, this is like, I guess this is again back before this became such a thing, and you kind of forget about it. But it's like at this time, everyone's like, dude, he runs a 4.5. Dude, he benches 400 pounds, and then that kind of stuff isn't as cool anymore, because it's like, dude, you have guys that are running 4.3, 4.2, like. Right. So he's talking about Harvin running. He's like, dude, the difference in a 4.3 and a 4.5 40. And he's showing it's 1 point. They're breaking down this whole science of it, and I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked to see how little he was using this game, because there's simple plays like where he's out wide and they bring him in motion and put him in the backfield, and he'll start like a counter and just go like he'll start left and do a counter and just go right back outside to the the right hand side of the field, like the right hash, and still faster than everybody on the field. Still gets to the corner. It was incredible.
He had more carries this year in 2007 than catches. He had 83 carries, 59 catches, but he had more receiving yards, 858 receiving yards and 764 rushing yards, 1,600 yards from scrimmage, 10 TDs. Just an unbelievable player that was so fun to watch.
How do you only get him 7 touches in this game?
So I just gave Dan Mullen credit, but that's something that comes back to him a little bit. Another star in this game, we're going to talk more of Percy Harvin later, even though his role in this game didn't necessarily warrant a ton of attention. But how about Brandon Spikes? So you didn't get the sense from watching the broadcast that he was this big time star yet. He had a huge year in 2007, 131 tackles, 16 TFLs, and he was clearly like the dude on the Florida defense. But you didn't get the sense necessarily early on from watching this game because of probably all the attention that was on Glen Dorsey in the LSU defense, and he was kind of the main guy that was talked about. But Brandon Spike's still just a problem to deal with. I don't know if you remember like those old NCAA video games, but Brandon Spikes was just unfair when you could just.
No, but I remember him playing real football.
Well, I mean, like those are my some of my memories of him. I'm like, just give me Brandon Spikes on defense, and I'll just sack the quarterback every time.
When he was recruited too, and that's one thing we'll talk about, like some of like the rosters and stuff like that. We talk about the cast, like. I remember these recruiting classes from Florida specifically because LSU, most of their guys were like early Doucette was on the team, who's like one of the top players in the country.
But out in this game.
Right. Ryan Perilou.
I'm
trying to think. Like there's just a lot of big. Terrence Tolliver was a 5-star. You had talent all over the field that were like Keelan Williams. But just a lot of like guys for LSU. But they were kind of coming off, especially when you talk about like the early Doucette and Ryan Perilou. They were kind of like in the latter half of their career. Florida's team had just come off the number 1 recruiting class the year before and the number 2 recruiting class before that with 8 5-stars, and it's starting the first part of these like super classes that they were signing with, and Tebow and Brandon Spikes both 5-stars, and you have like your alpha on offense, your alpha on defense, and that was like a big deal coming in there, and it was. he wasn't a star yet, but I remember like if you were around Florida fans, like there was so much hype around both of those guys.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got 2 stars on LSU. First, let's do Glen Dorsey because as we just talked about, he was the guy in the broadcast. This matchup was billed as this like almost like a Dorsey versus Tebow moment.
Yes.
And at very different stages of their career because Dorsey was going to become a top 5 pick in the draft after this season, but he was the consensus like, all right, this dude's an All-American. He's going to be special at the next level. He went 5th overall in 2008, but he didn't quite have the NFL career that I thought he would, admittedly.
Glen Dorsey is the Trent Richardson. He is the greatest. He's a in the last 25 years, he's one of the best SEC football players to ever play in the last 25 years. He's a generational type guy in the conference. And I don't know what happened in the NFL, but he's one of the most dominant players I've ever seen on defense.
Yeah, only 7 career sacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
He played 8 seasons too, but dealt with some injuries later on in his career. It just never quite worked out.
Right.
I think he got changed scheme wise like right after he got to Kansas City.
Yeah, he did.
And he moved from tackle to end. Things just didn't quite go his way. And
right.
It was surprising because the way he was talked about in this game, we're like, oh my gosh, this guy's he's gonna be like the next dominant defensive tackle in the NFL, and he's gonna make 10 Pro Bowls.
Well, it's not just the way they talked about it either, because it is the way he played. Like this season, like I mean, I remember watching as like this whole LSU was on the CBS 3:30 game every single week, like just every single week, and he was dominant from the start of the year to the finish of the year. It was incredible.
Even for people in the Midwest who didn't follow college football that much, they knew Glen Dorsey. I
cannot believe this next person is listed as the star.
Okay, so let's get to our guy, Jacob Hester, because he was in a starring role in this game. He was in a starring role in this season. Had a 1,000-yard season, 12 touchdowns. So there are some great things that came out of this. So Gary Danielson brings up the white running back stereotype. I don't know if he said that.
He said it. He literally said it. He goes, he's a white guy. And it was like, oh, yes. Say it, Gary.
And he, I don't know if Gary could get away with that in 2019.
Absolutely not.
But no. I picked up on that.
PETA would call.
So then he backed up. He's like, but he's not the white stereotype or whatever because he benches 430. He runs a 4.5. And then they were talking about, because like his wife was in the stands, and they were talking about, oh, he might be old, but he's not slow. It's like, come on, man, you can't say that.
He benches 430 and runs a 4.5.
So he's not.
I mean, he's that was awesome. Now I will say, part of this game reminded me of, and I don't want this to come off as like political or more than any kind of like. I don't want it to come off as like more than anything than just what I'm saying right now. Okay, there's like not a lot.
Are you about to be racist?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to say that as college football fans or people in general seem, and maybe it's just the way the TV broadcast does it, but like they seem to gravitate more towards making a star out of average to above average guys. That if they're white, like I don't know why, but like, yeah, I remember Tim Tebow was not the best player on this team. Like, Percy Harvin shouldn't have gotten 7 touches, but like all you heard about the entire year was people like Hester and Tebow, and it's like, I don't. It was cool, but I remember how like it became almost like ad nauseum at the end of the year. Like, oh my god, there's no way this guy is better than, this person on his own team. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so some personal bias that needs to be thrown out there. I love Jacob Hester. He's been like extremely good to us.
Yeah.
He's like so right before we were doing this, I sent him a text. I'm like, hey, this is a sick brag. Give me some nuggets here. Give me some good nuggets for stuff that happened in this game.
Yeah.
And because watching it during it, you're like, early on, you're kind of like, all right, they've got a crowded backfield. They use Hester, but he's a feature back, but not like a Leonard Fournette type player. Obviously,
Right.
Nobody's saying that. But as the game goes on, you realize just why he's so good and why he's gotten to this point in his career. Because all of these runs where he's just like falling forward, and my respect for him watching this game grew so much because of how much Les Miles trusted him in these 4th and 1 situations, which they were in constantly. Les Miles goes 5 for 5 on 4th and 1, including the second effort that he had on 4th and 1 when they're down 24-21, 7 minutes left in the game.
Yeah.
And he needed the second effort. He got hit in the backfield, and somehow he gets a first down.
I'm not saying that Hester wasn't a great back. He was a good back, and he had a great season that year. I'm just saying the Vern Lundquist wow, that whole thing. It's overused for players that are like in this setting.
I could understand that.
That's what I'm saying.
The first down that he picks up with 2 minutes left on 4th and 1, where they didn't even kick a field goal. Because they're like, you know what, our kicker is horrible. It was a Bama-like move to go for it in that spot.
Okay, first off, no, it was not. It was not a Bama-like move.
Well, they had the bad kicking, so they're like, okay, we got to avoid that at all costs.
Let's move into the director's part here, because it's the next part of like.
Wait, I got nuggets that I want to share about.
Okay, go ahead.
Hester. So, the game-winning touchdown that he scores. Spoiler alert. Jacob Hester scores the game-winning touchdown, and he's laying on the ground there. He's laying on the ground in this like perfect scene that just kind of captures the moment. What a dogfight this game really was. Yeah. So Hester told me that, because I texted him, I'm like, you were definitely concussed with that. There's no doubt in my mind, because they show him on the bench afterwards, and he has the helmet off, and he's like, kind of looks like he's in a little bit of a daze. He said that he faked an injury because there was an equipment issue, and he just laid on the ground, but they didn't want to burn the timeout because it's the last 90 seconds of the game, whatever it was, and they just basically told him like, hey, just like continue to lay on the ground. We're gonna milk this. This is an injury. We're gonna make it look like this. He walks off like he's trying to shake the cobwebs out a little bit, but he sells it really well. So
it looks like he had no idea where he was.
No idea.
But you're at this time in football where, like, I remember growing up around this, and my dad and grandpa always saying stuff like, "Oh, he got his bail wrong." Like, no, he is in trouble, guys. Like, that is a concussion, and that's what I thought was going on. Like, man, he got his bail wrong. Yeah, that was the worst.
Great.
Little, like, pinch neck or nerve in your neck. Yeah, that was incredible to watch.
So the other thing two other things that Hester said. So one, apparently before that play, Matt Flyn comes into the huddle, the game-winning touchdown that Hester scored. Matt Flyn comes into the huddle and says, you know what the play is, line up and put the ball in the end zone. Hester said that was
pretty cool.
Only time that happened in his career like that. And so for Flynn to say something like that really just obviously kind of speaks to how important that whole drive was. And so that, like, Hester obviously, it looked like he was shot out of a cannon on that run. I mean, really,
so he did.
Straight up the middle.
And like in this whole drive, again, we'll get to part of this later. It's a 15-play drive.
Epic drive.
Over 8.5 minutes, like, to end the game. And one thing that I was you look at this game, it's like 28-24, it's like a pretty high scoring game kind of, and like you felt like there was more offense. And then I remember watching it, and I remembered how awful it was to watch an LSU offense under Les Miles. And it was like, and honestly, Florida didn't look that great on offense, like especially on their stats in the second half especially. But like LSU had 3 different touchdown drives of 15 plays or more. Just eating up clock, but it's all like this 3 yards in a cloud of dust thing, and he looked like he was shot out of a cannon.
Before we move on to the directors, because we'll hit on Les Miles here. Brandon Spikes, Hester told me that Brandon Spikes throughout the entire game called him Vanilla Ice. which I think Gary Danielson would appreciate. White stereotypes there. But yeah, fun little nuggets from Hester. So shout out to Hester for giving us some insight on a game that really, I mean, such a, like, if you could go back on your career and look at one game, like that game just had to mean so much for a kid who grew up in Shreveport, your favorite place in the world, and how much that meant to him. All right.
Agreed.
Let's talk Les. The directors are very, very well known in the SEC. There's not a whole lot of new context we could really add to Les and Urban, two guys who are just such a big part of this conference. But Les is coming off of two 11-win seasons to start the post-Saban era at LSU. I
don't know how.
2 BCS wins. I mean, and is coaching the number one team in the country. And there's a lot of interesting dynamics that are at play here when we're talking about 2007 Les.
I forgot how bad of a coach Les Miles was.
That was
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. That is, I'm not trying to like not give him credit because he won a national championship. I remember jokingly and very like in a very biased way saying 2007 he won a national championship with Saban's players because it was 2007. I kind of still believe that because of watching him manage this game and manage that whole season. They lost the next week.
They lost the next week at Kentucky. A Kentucky team that was in the top 25, but still a bad loss.
Yeah. So and to be fair, like that's hard to go back to back on an emotional game like that. Like the same thing happened in 2012 when Bama lost to A&M. They had a dramatic win in Death Valley the week before, lost to Johnny Manziel the next week. So that's not why I don't think he's a great coach. The way he managed this game, and it's like legendary. He's like, he went for it on fourth down, 5 for 5. He shouldn't have done that at all. Like, that was not the best move. And I know that sounds dumb because, it worked out. They won. So the week before, I want to say, and I've told you this story before, and I don't know if you remember me saying it, but when they played Auburn, I'm sorry, it was the week after the Kentucky game. They played Auburn, all right? This is just a little insight into how Les Miles' mind works. They're playing Auburn. They get the ball with 3 minutes and 13 seconds to go. It's a tie game. They drive down the field. They get down to the 22-yard line with 19 seconds left, and the clock is running. They're on the 22-yard line. They have Colt David, who was the Hunter Renfrow of kickers, and he was there for 13 years, is good enough to hit a game-winning field goal. Instead, they run a pass play to the end zone, and they hit Demetrius Byrd in the back of the end zone, and it's like caught with like 1 second to go on the clock. But if he drops that ball or bobbles it or something like that, because like the guy's right on him, that you go to overtime and you don't win the game. Like you could have just won the game. And afterwards they asked me, we had plenty of time. No, you didn't. And he said, we just wanted to kick their ass. That was his actual reaction instead of winning a football game. And it was weird to me because it's like there is something to be said about being gutsy and about the bravado and believing in your team being able to get 1 yard. But there's also something to be said to going out there and making the decisions to put your team in the best position to actually win a game. And he routinely didn't do that this game.
But I think the takeaway from watching this game is Les just outcoached Urban. And Les
no, he did not.
But I think that's because when you go for when you get the 5 of 5 on fourth down and you're watching the way that this game finished. And the fact that, like, this team, I think you would look at this LSU team on paper and say, well, we know what Florida became, and Florida was still so young, but you would still probably look at that Florida team and go, they are the more talented team. They should be able to beat LSU on a given day. And when Florida's ahead like that, the fact that LSU is able to rally back, that I'm not saying that that's necessarily fair and that's like, that's all on Les Miles. He deserves 100% of the credit. But that's the way these things often get spun.
So as somebody that watched this season unfold in this game, I still have the mindset even now, Florida became more talented, but no, LSU is the more talented team. I know Early Doucette wasn't on the field. When you have Terrence Tolliver and you have Ryan Perilou and you have Keelan Williams and Jacob Hester and that offensive line and that the defense especially. So they had seven first team All-SEC players that year. They had 7 guys drafted on the team. LSU is a more talented team. What I'm saying specifically is Urban outcoached him in this game, and this is not even about the fourth down things. This is stuff like with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, when Brandon James seemingly steps out of bounds. You're down 10 points, right?
That review took forever, by the way.
That review did take forever. Maybe they were down only 3 points, but he challenges where he stepped out of bounds, and they were going over it. And it's like it's not a turnover. It's not is it a first down, or it's not something that had a huge impact on how the game would play out. He might have stepped out of bounds inside the 20 or inside the 25. It was a difference of 9 yards, and he was risking his final timeout, which, by the way, he only had 1 timeout left in the second half of this game with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Like, it was, sure, he's a riverboat gambler, but it was so stupid. It's so dumb.
Urban in this game, when you see him at first, I want to talk about the pregame interview that he did with Tracy Wolfson. It is classic Urban
so
Meyer.
Peak.
So Urban looks about 30 years younger in this. I think that's fair to say. I mean, looks way, way younger, just not even close. So before the game, Tracy Wolfson doesn't want to talk about, what's at
Coach.
stake here, blah, blah, blah. Literally, like, they're running onto the field, all this is going down. The backstory is Tony Joyner, who is a senior captain for Florida, defensive back, that Tuesday night, he was arrested at a tow truck place at 5 a.m. The charges were dropped that week, but apparently what he was accused of was pushing open an electric gate to get his girlfriend's car out, and he got his girlfriend's car out, but then somebody saw him doing it, so he apparently put the car back. I don't know, but basically, so this is a senior captain that's doing this. So Tracy asks Urban if he'll play, and Urban says Tony will play tonight, and then Tracy didn't hesitate. So Tracy asked the follow-up, will he start? Urban says, I don't believe he'll start, but he'll get in pretty soon. Guess what series he played on?
Second.
The second series.
Dude, Urban Meyer is such a he's just such like a when it comes to like the discipline part of it, it's just such a trash bag mentality of the stuff they did. And I know it probably sounds like too much, but it's funny that you got to see this in this game, because I'm not exaggerating when I say this is a consistent pregame interview, a consistent like pregame storyline during especially in the first 4 years of his career. And it was a joke. Like, I mean, so in the first 4 years of him coaching there, he had 26 arrests from his players, and it was stuff like this, where it's like, first off, why are you out at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday night, like before what's arguably the biggest game of your season, after coming off a loss? Like, and then he comes like he had 26 people arrested, and it was for stuff like not just drunk and disorderly, but one of his players got arrested for credit card fraud because he was using the credit card of a deceased girlfriend of one of his teammates. Like one of his teammates had a girlfriend who passed away, and he was using her credit card to buy gas for his car. And those kind of kids were like, dude, just kick him off the team. Like, how do you allow this to happen? So yeah, I was not surprised. I don't even know who Tony Joyner was, but I was not surprised. Like, oh yeah, he's gonna play. Basically, just like all the FU, the middle finger to any kind of like authority or morals and stuff like that we know about him now was in full display.
I just love that Urban said, I don't believe he'll start. Like, you don't know. Okay, all right. Thanks, Urban. Thanks for telling the truth. Really appreciate that. We're a way to keep your secrets tied down. We're going to find out in 30 seconds. Oh, and by the way,
your defensive backfield, you're loaded with talent. So, Hayden, I mean, I know he's a senior, but like, come on.
Yeah. One last thing on the directors. We usually don't talk about coordinators as much in this game.
Oh, no, we need to, though.
What a great matchup. Bo Pelini's defense against Dan Mullen's offense. Bo Pelini was in great, rare form in this game. There was a moment where there was that hit on the sideline. Ali Highsmith hit Tebow late.
That was bad.
It was a dumb hit, but he hit it.
Well, he hit him low.
He hit him low as Tebow was going out of bounds. Just like easy flag. Like 2 flags were thrown right there on the sideline. But it was on the LSU sideline. And Les and Bo Pelini just go absolutely nuts. I mean, I thought Bo was gonna hit the ref. And I'm wondering. I'm like, what in the world are they doing? This is the most obvious thing ever. How are they arguing this so much? It was the dumbest play.
And they were on both sides of the official. Like that is the most
surrounding him.
Bo Pelini, like, there's people that get mad and you're scared of because they look like they're gonna hit you or they're yelling at you and they're intimidating. Bo Pelini is scary because he looks like the kind of person that's like, What's something I could grab in here? Oh, there's a toothpick. I'm gonna kill you with this toothpick.
Yeah.
Like he would just pick. He doesn't seem sane, is what I'm saying. But what was not talked about at all was the fact that, and I saw it just from looking at the sidelines. We always talk about this Saban coaching tree, and this guy, are all head coaches now. on that sideline under Urban Meyer, you had Steve Adazio, who became or still is the head coach of Boston College. You had Charlie Strong, you had Dan Mullen, you had Bo Pelini.
Man, unbelievable star power. I mean, and it makes sense because those coaches were part of national championship teams. That's the way that usually works. Bo Pelini ends up getting the Nebraska job later on because of what he did as the coordinator, which I spent a few years covering Bo Pelini at Nebraska while I was out there. And let me tell you, a post-game Bo Pelini press conference is a treat, especially after a loss.
I'm sure.
Oh, especially after a loss. They are all sorts of fun. And so, like, you could see the early stages of him just being this berserk guy. Dan Mullen, I don't think, got a single second of FaceTime, though, which was kind of weird. Did he?
He did for a minute. They put it up there on the screen or whatever. Like, it was right around that exact time, like during like the play, I think, on the sideline, or the late hit, because they mentioned he was a tight end at whatever school he went to.
Right.
But it was like the most dismissive, like, this guy's not important, we'll never hear about him again.
Which
like
is kind of weird because looking back, I actually give Mullen more credit than Urban for some of this stuff. I understand Urban had more of a hands-on approach in this offense, but I think kind of looking back, we're like, Dan Mullen knew what he was doing. I don't think it's a coincidence that Florida kind of became what it was in 2010 in that final year of Urban, where he just underachieves, where Mullen's off at Mississippi State. I'm not saying it's just because of that.
It sounds like that's what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Trust me, that's not what I'm saying. But I think Mullen was, that's my way of saying, I think Mullen was a bigger part of this than what we were able to kind of grasp from watching a game like this.
I agree with that. But I want to go back to the first thing that we said before getting into this segment, or this part of the show. You could not be more wrong about Urban Meyer being outcoached by Les Miles.
All right, fair enough. I think that's the way, though, that you would look at this. That's just the way that it's construed when you're talking about a team that comes back and rallies after being down 10, in the fourth quarter, whatever. All right, the breakout performers, not a ton in this game necessarily, but a guy that we've talked about already, Matt Flyn. So Matt Flyn comes into this game as the fifth-year senior, so that's atypical for what we're talking about with a breakout star. But he has this ankle injury, and they're like, hey, Ryan Perrillou's going to play in this game as well. Matt Flyn had to sit behind Jamarcus Russell, of course, and he watches Russell just turn into this star at LSU. And so the interesting about Flyn, and he had bad moments this game, like real bad moments. First pass he threw was an interception to Joe Hayden, who was another breakout star as well, who was just a freshman at the time.
Yeah, he killed it.
Yeah, and the first play, you're like, oh gosh, this is gonna be really rough. But there were just some special moments that Flyn had in this game where he had the fake field goal early in the third quarter where they're down 10. And they just badly need some sort of momentum to get going. And it was very reminiscent, not the exact same thing, because this fake field goal Flyn runs for and picks up the first down, as opposed to a couple weeks ago at South Carolina, where he pulls off one of the best fake field goals in the history of college football, where he does, because Matt Flynn's the holder, and he does the little toss back over his shoulder to the kicker. So incredible. So, like, he has these little moments like this, and then obviously he's leading the drive at the end there, and they really rely on him to be able to pick up a lot of these first downs, he and Jacob Hester. So, yeah, Flyn, I'd consider Flyn a breakout star in this game.
Okay. I would not, only because of... You tell me if this sounds like an LSU quarterback. 14 of 27, 144 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Man, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, because that is one takeaway I had from this is, like, I easily see the national narrative and frustration with how average, I wouldn't say bad, but average SEC quarterback play can be. Because, I mean, Tebow was 12 of 26. Like, I thought he threw a better ball, but it was still like, oof. So I wouldn't say he was a breakout performer for me. Like, I remember a lot of the season, like, people, like, LSU fans loved Matt Flyn because he won him a national championship, but there was a, like, this kind of wanting of, like, all right, when's Ryan Perrilloux going to be ready? Like, when is this dude, like, going to take over? Because it's not just what he said about himself, and we'll get to that later, the coldest take, but, like, he was a massive recruit that you kind of thought was going to take over immediately for when Jamarcus Russell left, and he was able to win them an SEC championship game when Flyn was out, but I wouldn't say Flyn was necessarily the breakout star. I think guys like like Percy Harvin, I thought you started to see like the glimpses of how great he was and how much he could take over a football game or impact a game. I would say him, and then guys like I wouldn't say Brandon LaFell because he had
so many drops.
He had so many. I think he had more
drops.
Drops than catches.
Nothing changed. Brandon LaFell is still dropping passes somewhere.
Yeah, but I would say like guys like I thought Perlew was a pretty big impact, but like guys like Demetrius Byrd, I thought that was he didn't have like from a statistical standpoint, but him and Terrence Todd were being young, and kind of being able to carry a little bit more of that passing game for LSU was pretty important.
Real quick before we to put a bow on Flynn. The LSU runs the 2-quarterback system in this game, and Gary Danielson keeps calling it modern football. And he's calling it that, which is weird, so strange looking back on it. He's calling it that because obviously Florida won a national championship with Chris Leak and Tim Tebow using this 2-quarterback system. And so it looks like LSU is just part of this wave of the future type deal with having Ryan Perlew and Matt Flynn in this game, and they keep, he keeps rotating him in, and he's pretty much using Ryan Perlew in the Tebow-like role when they get in the red zone, and it's mostly in running situations. But it's so weird looking back and hearing Danielson keep saying, I think he says modern football 5 or 6 times in this game, and you're like, wait a minute, this was actually more the exception than the rule. Florida had a very special situation, but just strange to look back and think that was once thought of as like modern thinking.
There was one moment, I have it in my coldest takes, but if we'll just bring it up now, where I remember this happening, and there was like, it was so stupid, and it happened consistently, where you'd have these like crazy formations from coaches, and they'd be like, oh, this is what football's gonna be now, man. And so there's a play in the second quarter where Tim Tebow lines up, and like so, and like Gus Malzahn did this a lot, especially before he became a head coach, and there was like nothing as like a fan that doesn't understand these kind of offenses, and I think they're kind of gimmicky and stupid, likes more than when they're stopped, like when they don't work, you know what I mean? And so they line up, and there's one offensive lineman in front of Tebow. Tebow's in the shotgun. All 4 other offensive linemen are as far out as they can be to the right hash of the field. And then there's like a receiver in the slot, a receiver where the right guard should be, or right tackle should be. And then there's like a tight end and another receiver on the far left hash. And it's like, what? And Vernon goes, wow, look at this. And it was like you expected to see just magic, just absolute magic happen. And LSU stays in their base defense, and Glen Dorsey runs right at him. And they sack Tebow for a 7-yard loss. It's like, yeah, dumbass. Like, why are you having all 4 of your guards should be in front of one of the most ridiculously talented defensive lines with Glen Dorsey, Ricky Jean-Francois, who was out for this game. But like those type of guys, and then putting him as far away from him as possible. You know what? If Glen Dorsey is 4 yards from me, maybe put one guy in front of him.
Maybe
it was. Yeah, he gets sacked for a 7-yard loss. And I was like, this is... And you know what's funny, too, is the most effective play that LSU was able to run, and of course, typical of an LSU offense under Les Miles, was a 32 plunge off like left guard, and then also the option. They ran the option.
Yeah, the throwback option with Ryan Perlew, that was magic.
Imagine having all that talent on Florida's offense and having Percy Harvin and Tim Tebow in the backfield, and then doing stupid crap like QB draw. Hey, we're going to spread out 87 offensive linemen over the field and then do an oop-de-doop route.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well. So you bring up Dorsey. Dorsey actually in this game was relatively quiet, and that was a credit to another breakout star.
Yeah.
I thought Marquise Pouncey played really, really well. He's a freshman starting at right guard and dealing with Glen Dorsey, one of the biggest forces that we've seen at the position in the 21st century. And my goodness, I mean, Gary Danielson said with 3 or 4 minutes left, he's like, where has he been? Like, where's Glen Dorsey been this entire time? And it's because Pouncey actually played really well and handled himself, and that was.
Keep an eye on Marquise Pouncey, on whatever his name is. Keep an eye on Pouncey. He's a true freshman. That's what he says at the start of the game. And it was like, first off, I've never felt more old. And watching that, because I was like, oh my god, he was a freshman. And then Joe Hayden, who doesn't even have like the same number that he ended up wearing like the rest of his career. That was crazy. But yeah, that was I would say he's definitely a breakout star in this game.
Yeah. And then I put Joe Hayden in here just because not only did he make that pick, but he had the 2 huge tackles that forced those 4th downs where he's blowing up plays in the backfield and you're like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? This is a cornerback making plays like this that looks like he's like a safety coming in from center field, and he's making big time plays in the backfield. That was a good sign.
The third down stop he had inside their own 10-yard line on Hester. And that's something, especially with the narrative that gets brought up with a tough back like Hester who's falling forward every time. That's something that's a freshman cornerback. I don't know how big he was, but I know he wasn't as big as he was as a senior or now as one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL. But yeah, man, he could bring the wood, man. He was a very good tackler.
Okay, so the prominent extra, or did you have any more breakout stars?
No, but I have about 87 prominent extras, so I'll let you start.
The prominent extras in this game, everybody knows who they are. I listed 3 because you could probably list about 30 in this game. Aaron Hernandez, Riley Cooper, everybody kind of knows. Those guys are in very, very quiet roles. You see Aaron Hernandez on screen, but he was still just a freshman at the time, and he was very limited in this offense. Had 151 receiving yards this season.
He's just hanging out in the background,
just kind of chilling there. He's around, but he's not. That is like the peak example of a prominent extra. Riley Cooper, kind of the same thing. He's got his flow, and he's only a sophomore. He's not really a big factor in the offense. Only 182 receiving yards on the year and 3 touchdowns, but the one that is the most prominent extra, in my opinion, it's not even close, good old Cam Newton. Cam Newton is the backup quarterback for Florida at this time, and he's not used in this game, but in this season where he's a true freshman, he only had 10 pass attempts, 40 yards, 16 carries for 103 yards, did have 3 rushing touchdowns, which is, Florida playing in these blowout games, of course. But if this were now and Cam Newton was in that situation, here's the interesting thing. He transfers after 2007. There's no way he sticks around.
Okay, so that's one thing. That's such a good point, dude, because one of the thoughts I had watching this with Ryan Perrilloux and Cam Newton, and I'll give you another one. He's in my prominent extras. You don't remember this guy, but John Brantley.
Oh yeah, who's third string.
When John Brantley and Cam Newton were both 5-star recruits, and Urban Meyer said, I'm almost positive this. I don't remember the exact quote, but Urban Meyer brought up the fact that he was the most impressive high school quarterback he had recruited while he was at Florida, like before Brantley. This is why he's still at Florida. So I brought this up to my buddy George Simpson. I said, weren't you the one that said that told me Urban said Brantley was like the best quarterback recruit he'd ever seen? And he said, yeah, I'm pretty sure he said that, but he also was a liar. So but it was my biggest takeaway was like, if the transfer portal was a thing now, then all of them, all the backups would have been gone.
Oh yeah. So, but the thing that was different about then, of course, Florida was coming, as we said, off this national title where they used the 2 quarterback system. And if you're Cam, you're probably thinking to yourself, all right, maybe I can carve out the Tim Tebow-like role. But with only 1 year of difference between the 2 of them, Cam would have looked and been like, all right, Tebow just finished his sophomore year where he won the Heisman. And this guy, I don't think he's necessarily
and I'm better than him.
Yeah, maybe there is a little bit of that, but you're looking at the situation, Cam would have transferred, and so then he would have never stolen a laptop in November of 2008. And then Cam's story is just way
glad you
way
brought
different.
that up, Connor. He would have never stolen a laptop that he then wrote his initials in whiteout on as they were knocking on his door, and then thrown it out the window of a 2-story building that he was in. Silk.
Exactly. So
also would have probably one of the things that's forgotten about is, again, this is a 5-star recruit, and he was listed as an athlete. He obviously played quarterback in high school, but Bark Richt famously told him he was going to be a tight end at Georgia. Gosh. So, but yeah, that is. So I'm going to get to my prominent extras, and I know they're different than yours because you did yours the correct way, and I listed off every single. Because so for me, it's like I get the way you did it is the more efficient, better way to do it. I just, for me, it's like somebody that remembers all these recruiting classes, remembers all these games, and the people that ended up having big impacts later. I was blown away by the people that, like on the Bama Georgia one, we talked about, all the players ended up going, getting drafted from Georgia's defense, and there's all these guys that became like big stars. This was similar, but like not on the NFL level. It's like way more for just like the SEC level. They were legitimate stars though. But like guys like Trenton Holiday, I forgot was on this team. The little 5'8", 5'7".
He's pretty active in this, relatively active in this game, I think. Like I noticed.
Trenton Holiday was a huge player in the SEC that year. Like I mean, like because you didn't have guys that were as fast as Trenton Holiday, man. He was like running that.
Jet,
I think he said, yeah. Early Doucette, like I said, is not in the game. Ryan Barrelou that was crazy. Chad Jones was a big one, and I don't know if you remember the story with Chad Jones, but Chad Jones was a massive recruit. They thought was going to go in like the top 1 or 2 rounds of the Major League Baseball draft. Ended up going to LSU as a 5-star defensive back, and also playing baseball there. And he had a horrific car accident years later and it ended his career. But he was supposed to be special. Like he was going to be like the next guy. And he played a little bit in this game. He was a freshman All-American that season. But Chad Jones was big. And then we have Chad Jones. People like Chevis Jackson. I forgot about Craig Stelz, man.
Ooh, Craig Stelz is very active in this game. He basically had 11 tackles by the end of the first quarter. You're like, okay.
He's an All-SEC guy, and that was, I mean. So then you have guys like for Florida, which you almost had to stop listing it off because it was crazy,
it's
and a lot of
insane.
them were this early in the like stages of their career. But I forgot about Bubba Caldwell, Andre Caldwell. I think that's how they refer to him as Bubba Caldwell. Maybe I feel like they've had a Callaway or a Caldwell on every single team at receiver for like the last 15 years.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, but then you have guys like you said, like the Aaron Hernandez thing. So take Casey, who's a kid I played baseball with. He was on one of my summer teams. He was like one of the top national recruits to play baseball. He's like, I'm going to play tight end at Florida. And he was from Texas. I thought that was, and he was the one that caught the famous jump pass from Tebow.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
they showed that, of course,
a bazillion times. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then just stuff like that LSU backfield, and you have Keyshawn Moore, who leads the team in rushing in this game, which is shocking when you have guys like Brandon James, Emmanuel Moody, Chris Rainey. That was kind of surprising to me. And then those receivers and the defensive line. And one thing we forget about with this defense, because we heard so much about the defense for LSU, there's guys that were on that Florida team that were like Carlos Dunlap and then Derek Harvey, who Derek Harvey blocked 3 field goals in one game against South Carolina in 2006.
Gosh.
Just absolute freaks that just didn't, you just don't see that they don't do stuff like that anymore.
I think
that's all of mine.
I think you could probably keep going for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
The receivers alone.
It's unbelievable. Yes, prominent extras. But before we talk about the story arc of this game, let's do let's tell you guys about let's take a quick break. We're going to talk about our Facebook group, which is sponsoring It Just Meant More. Want to take a quick second and give a shout out to our Facebook group. Yes, the Saturday Down South podcast Facebook group is sponsoring It Just Meant More. That is the place where we are throwing out good discussion topics, where we're posting the podcast, where we're just having a lot of fun, as Marler likes to do, as many of you know. If you have not joined our Facebook group yet, make sure you do that. We want to continue to grow our Facebook community, and especially now, we're doing 2 podcasts a week now, so that is the place to be. You want to ask a fourth and wrong question, make sure that it gets answered. Make sure that you sign up for our Facebook page. Make sure that you tell your friends about it, tell your parents, tell your girlfriends, tell your boyfriends, tell your whoever, tell your pets. I don't know if your pet has a Facebook. A lot of pets do these days. Kind of creeps me out. But anyway, just get them to our Facebook group right now. All right, back to the podcast. Your favorite line from the broadcast with Vern and Gary was what?
Okay, so this is tough because there's a couple of them that are like my coldest takes and my favorite line because they were so dumb.
There's some crossover there.
Yeah, so there was a line from Gary Danielson that I thought was pretty good. I'm gonna say 2. He's had a quote. He said, "It's not for the faint of heart. If you want to win a national championship, someone's got to knock you in the chin a couple times, and you got to get up off the canvas." And I thought that was so fitting because he said couple of times, and I know he didn't mean it with any kind of subversive way, but obviously this becomes the first team and the last team that besides 1941 Alabama, that claimed the national championship. This is the last team that has had 2 losses and won a national championship. And I'm totally kidding about the 1941 thing. That's ridiculous. But the other one was he comes back from a commercial and they're talking about Death Valley at night, and it was, I don't know if it was exactly like it wasn't. I don't think he was correct or accurate in saying it, but it was funny with what Vern said. He said Gary Danielson comes back. They're showing Billy Cannon after his famous touchdown in the 1959 game on Halloween.
Pick six?
No, it was a punt return.
Oh, I thought it was a pick six.
No.
Oh, it looked like it was a
We're
very
about to lose a
long
lot of street cred from SEC fans.
I really did. Okay.
No. It's like one of the most famous plays in SEC history. But so he has the famous touchdown late on Halloween night, 1959, wins the Heisman that year. But he said, that's the beauty of college football. It never changes. The uniforms are the same. And he's talking about, like, you come here with your grandpa, same seats, same seats with dad, same seats now. He said, it never changes. Uniforms are the same. The field looks the same. Cheerleaders look the same. It's like being a Cubs or a Red Sox fan. It never changes. And Vern goes, you and I do not look the same. That's where that ends. It was really funny. So that was probably my favorite line from the broadcast.
That was very good. That was peak Vernon Gary.
Yeah.
The first throw that Matt Flynn has, where it's just that awful pick to Joe Hayden. I can't remember. Was it LaFell that he threw it behind? I can't remember, but it was just a terrible throw on a quick slant that should have been an easy first down. And Gary Danielson goes, this is just a woeful throw from Matt Flynn. Just a woeful throw. Just shreds him on the first play. It was pretty bad. But, like, Gary being, who he is, he's going to be very honest. And then I already said before that LSU football on a Saturday night, there's nothing quite like it in all of college football that Vern opened the broadcast with. The other one was just
this
so
is good.
Great. When Florida takes the 24-14 lead, it's this long touchdown pass to Cornelius Ingram where Tebow just hits him wide open, and there's just nobody near him in the same galaxy. And so what happened was Craig Steltz, who we brought up before as one of the prominent extras, he bit on the fake receiver screen, which Dan Mullen doing his thing, I think that was. Just this incredible answer from Florida where they make it a 24-14 game, and the crowd was previously going crazy because, as we found out, Jim Harbaugh's Stanford team had upset USC. One of the biggest upsets in college football history.
Uncle Chris gambling line here. There was a 41-point underdog.
And Stanford won that game at USC. So LSU fans are going nuts. They're like, it's a 3-point game. Everything's going our way, blah, blah, blah. And then Tebow hits Cornelius Ingram on this long touchdown pass. And then they're looking at the replay, and Gary goes, he looked like the first guy out for practice. He was so wide open on that throw. He really did. It's unbelievable.
I spit up my beer. I spit up my water last night watching this game when he did this because I was like how is he that open? And again, this is the number one defense in the country, and it was just like, what in the hell just happened? But
I've never seen a receiver so wide open.
No, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. But yeah, and it's funny too. We talked about this like off air before we started recording. Like the crowd going crazy for the 2007 thing. There were so many peak 2007 moments here that were. It was funny to look back at because like you said, this is before like cell phones were as prevalent or prominent and like. That's when I remember those days, like when you had to wait and listen, and the whole crowd would be quiet, so you could hear them make this like the announcements of other scores from like around the league or around the country, and now they have like the streaming banner, like the ESPN bottom line, like going all around the stadium, yeah. So it like everyone was like, oh, and like freaks out about USC losing, and then I remember them flashing up the rankings, and again we talked about that 2007 season, like, and he makes the comment, he's like, wow. Because also another great quote was, what a great moment for Ron Zook today. And it was because he was in Illinois and they beat Wisconsin.
Who was number 5 in the country.
Right. And then like so the number 3 team, so the number 2 team lost. The number 3 team was Cal somehow, and they're on a bye. The number 4 team, I don't know. And then so South Florida was number 6, and he says, wow, South Florida's gonna be the top 5. South Florida got up to number 2 in the country.
Which is just so peak 2000.
Missouri was ranked number 1 at one point during the season. Because
if you weren't ranked number 1 or number 2 in the country in 2007, your team should have forfeited. Everybody. That aged super well too. The LSU fans going nuts hearing that number 2 USC had just lost because USC only lost 2 games that season, and that ended up being a thing that kind of opened the door for LSU to even be allowed to play in that game.
Dude, I've said this before, and I know that I was kind of crapping on Les Miles earlier in the broadcast, and I'm not trying to pile on. I've said this not just today, and I've said this several times on the show. The 2007 season, the best two teams in the country were Georgia and USC, and either one of those teams would have beat LSU, I think. So, and I'm sorry to say it, guys, but yeah, like I get why they were going crazy, but it was. I mean, think about this: how crazy that season was. So 7 of the last 9 weeks of the season, the number 2 team in the country lost, and late in the season. Missouri and Kansas were playing, and that was the game I talked about, the game day sign, where somebody just started banging up a giant cupcake next to Mangino's fat face. That was Missouri-Kansas was 2-3.
And somehow found a way.
Right.
What a year. What a year. Illinois went to the Rose Bowl that year.
Oh, like, yeah. What? Who was the running back? Merriweather?
No, it was, it was, oh, wow, why am I blanking? Mendenhall. Rashard
Mendenhall, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But that year was just so nuts, and like that week was just such a perfect example.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to go back, because if this were 2019, everybody's following along on their phone, or they're looking up at the stadium. And it's a more subdued cheer than like, oh, everybody finds out at this one moment because Stanford scored the game-winning touchdown at the very end.
Right.
So great moment. Coldest take from the broadcast. There are some good candidates here. What did you have?
Oh, coldest take? Oh, man. I got several, but there's one in particular. So the look at this from Vern about that stupid play. So when Tebow scores late in the first half, it goes up 17-7, and they are just all over Tebow. And it only got worse as the season went on, because this is a 9-4 team, but he scores 55 touchdowns, right? And Gary Danielson says, "Not since Vince Young have I seen a quarterback control a game like this." I mean,
said it multiple times.
And Vince Young was a senior. This guy's a sophomore. First off, Gary, Vince Young, like, I don't know why he said not since Vince, like, it was like way back. It was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago. And by the way, yeah, you're going to get cold taked hard, because it's the first half. It's 17-7. They're in complete control at this point. But yeah, that didn't play out very well, because they had 44 total yards of offense in like the fourth quarter. They fell apart in the second half. And the other one was, and this is, I think, not just the coldest take from this broadcast, but one of the dumbest things I've ever heard anyone say in the history of the human language.
Whoa.
When Les Miles converts the fourth down, there's 1 minute and 47 seconds to go, and that is the fourth down where they could have kicked a field goal to tie the game. Now, to be fair, they had missed 2 field goals in this game. So maybe
Colt David was not feeling himself.
No, but they're like it's like a 23-yard field goal. So he says, "Oh man, Nick Saban who if they win this game?" What?
I was going to get to that later. Yep, I was going to get to that later. Yeah, Gary had some rough ones in this game.
Nick Saban who?
The one that I wanted to talk about on the top of the broadcast, I like the YouTube clips where they show kind of the pregame studio action. Yeah. Tim Brando and Spencer Tillman. Spencer Tillman says on the pregame broadcast, and he speaks so fast and he sounds so confident in everything he says, so it makes it that much better. He said, if Tim Tebow runs the ball 15 to 20 times this game like he did a couple weeks ago, he'll be knocked out by halftime.
He's very convincing when he says stuff.
Very convincing. Yeah. Tebow, of course, ran the ball 16 times and was absolutely not knocked out by halftime, or really at any point. And Tebow probably did more knocking out of anyone. But it was still this belief of like, can this sophomore come in and be able to handle a tough SEC defensive line? It's like, yeah, it's Tim Tebow. He's going to be okay.
Well, remember they said too at one point in the broadcast, and I know what I said earlier, and like about how you make like a bigger deal out of players like that. But remember what they said earlier in the broadcast? They said we asked like his teammates, and they said he's the toughest person we've ever met, which is crazy. No one's ever said that physically, emotionally, or mentally about a homeschooled kid. Throw that out there.
True. Good point. Okay, so we've kind of delayed talking about this. LSU fans, you know it's coming. The Ryan Perrilloux discussion. So Ryan Perrilloux cold-taked himself because when he signed with LSU, he said he guaranteed himself 4 Heismans. So that's a bold move. Archie Griffin would probably look at that and be like, just try and get 2, and then we'll talk. So he didn't even start 4 games for LSU.
That stat is crazy.
Which is nuts. After this year, he was kicked off the team. So this was his 3rd season, and he had missed classes. He failed a drug test, And he and Mark Sanchez were the two top quarterbacks in that 2005 class.
Right.
As you talked about earlier, everybody expected him to take over for Jamarcus Russell. They're waiting on him to just be the guy. So the cold take isn't necessarily just Ryan Perlew, though I guess it kind of is.
Yeah.
But it's the quote that Gary had about him. So he said, after one of these runs where he makes a nice, like, he was probably running an option or something like that, or it was like one of those where he makes like a nice little 6-yard gain and he kind of flashes the potential. Maybe it was even the touchdown run that he had in this game where he was used in a very Tebow-like role. So Danielson says, I would also say that he's as good as advertised. He is going to be a spectacular player, and no matter what happens this year, if he plays more or not, he'll be ready to be a feature player next year. And then he wasn't on the team next year.
Yeah, that's craziness. I mean, I will say, like, from a talent standpoint, that kid was talented. Just get your blank together, and that's it. But also, like, yeah, if you can't beat out Matt Flynn, like, dude.
Man.
Anyway.
Poor Matt Flynn.
Yeah.
The Jadeveon Clowney reminder that normal human beings don't play this sport. Now, when we did the first one, Amari Cooper was just an obvious no-doubter. But this game didn't really have these flashes of ridiculous top 10 plays. It was more of smash-mouth SEC football in a lot of different ways.
Right.
There weren't these big-time highlight reel moments. So I went in a different direction with this. Because I think Tebow had about 12 of them, where I looked at something he did where he's...
I don't know how
if he's... At his size, at 250 pounds, whatever he is,
running a 4.7.
Yeah, making some of the moves that he did in the open field, though, like where he had the second touchdown. So it was the touchdown run where he kind of made like that like nice move at the end and just up the middle of the field where he saw single coverage and he just ran it right up the gut and got into the end zone. That was impressive. The interception where he threw the ball off Cornelius Ingram's helmet, that wasn't one of those.
He threw such a bet. I wrote down in my original notes. I said he was like a really good college quarterback. He was like he threw a good ball. He seemed accurate.
Great college quarterback.
Yeah, well, no, I mean strictly from a passing standpoint, because that's what everyone brought up when he got to the NFL. Yeah, he's one of the best college quarterbacks of all time. But like from a passing standpoint, like he throws a nice spiral. He throws a good ball. But then you like look at the stats. He's 12 of 26, and then also threw a ball off someone's face. That was tough.
That was a rough.
I will say
moment
it was stuff like there was a play and Gary got all excited about it where he was being tackled, like he's being they're trying to drag him to the ground. He's rolling out to his left, and he ends up hitting. I think it was like Lewis Murphy for a first down. It was like a 15-yard pass, but he's got one of these massive LSU defensive linemen draped all over him. Mm-hmm. And just fires a strike to this kid that's accurate, right on the money for a first down. I was like you, as much as I made the joke earlier about how like we build up these players to be more than they are. Sometimes if they're white, like Tebow is the stuff he does physically is stupid.
It's unreal.
Yeah,
it's absolutely amazing watching this. Yeah, so I would say Tebow had those moments, and then like I said, I thought Hester had a lot of moments in this game where like he's picking up the 4th and 1 plays where he just gets blown up in the backfield. And an average human being is demolished on this play, is probably depleted on some of these plays.
Right.
And the leg drive that Hester has in this game, if you're a college or a high school football coach and you're trying to show your running backs what leg drive is, you flip on the film and watch what Jacob Hester did in these key moments, because he was unbelievable and just keeping those legs churning and being able to get that every last inch was going to count on those plays. And that's superhuman in itself to be able to have that kind of will to do that.
I agree. And I'll say you didn't see it as much in this game, but I'll say guys like Trenton Holiday who are like, world-class speed, that kind of thing. Like Harvin for me is the one that like the normal human beings don't play the sport, because what he's able to do, and it's specifically, I want to say it only gained like 8 yards, but when they brought him into the backfield and he takes the handoff and goes left, and then it's just a counter play to the right side of the field, and he's still able to bounce outside and get to the corner. That was, I mean, this was a very, very talented defense. That was impressive. And then like other stuff like where I said you didn't see it in this game, but like the Carlos Dunlap and the Derek Harvey thing where you just have these like absolute physical specimens like off the edge was really impressive to me.
Let's the Harvin transition that's perfect, because the Trent Richardson, I can't believe they didn't make it in the NFL. I understand that Harvin had an okay NFL career. He won Rookie of the Year, which I kind of forget that, but I thought he was going to change the NFL. I thought he was going to be one of those guys that makes a ton of Pro Bowls. It's just this do-it-all, like play for a long time, Hall of Fame type player. And those first 4 years, like you look back, he's actually like pretty decent, but he never had that 1,000-yard season. After his first 4 years of his career, where he's dealing with migraines and stuff like that, which he became known for, he only played in 21 more NFL games, which is nuts.
He was just nuts. He's not built the same way, and he didn't have the same college career. But this is like a Reggie Bush type of generational athlete. And like I remember in the 2008 SEC championship game, he was out for that. No, wait, he was not out for that game. Maybe it was 2009.
I thought he was. No, maybe it was 2009. Yeah.
So I remember, maybe it was 2008. I don't remember. I thought he scored the game-winning touchdown in 2008. But I remember at some point he was on the sidelines and he was just in his jersey and he's not a big dude. Like it doesn't seem like on the field. His
5'11" maybe.
Yeah, but his biceps were massive, and I was like, he's like a pretty big dude. I didn't know that. And somebody, like a buddy of mine who's a Florida fan, was like, yeah, he benches like 425 pounds. I was like, what? Like he was a physical freak. I'll say for mine, it's Glen Dorsey.
Yeah,
that is like the defensive Trent Richardson. Like I've as somebody that's like has watched this game for or watched SEC games for a long time. I don't remember. I don't want to say it's like Manti Te'o where he it was like disappointing at the next level, or even like Te'o was like the national championship game, but. There are a few players that are as decorated as him defensively ever, from his position. You know what I mean? And so I was just shocked. Like that is if you ask me today, I would still stand by it. Like that is in the past 25, 30 years, that is one of the best. If you were making an All SEC team from that time, he's easily on the 4-man front on the defensive line.
And especially at a position like defensive tackle, it's not like you're a quarterback and you can kind of get put into a weird situation, or maybe you're a receiver or running back and you're kind of, maybe you deal with injuries or an offensive system that's just not really conducive to you. A defensive tackle, it's just mano-a-mano, you're lining up. I thought that guy was going to be able to have success in one-on-one matchups in the NFL.
He played for 8 years too, and he had his tackle numbers weren't bad for his position, but I'm talking from like a dominant standpoint. Like I thought he was going to take over.
I did too, and that's why he was the 5th overall pick. But yeah, I think he played on like 2 different playoff teams, but never really became that force that we expected to see. Okay, so
hold on, I want to say one more thing real quick. When we talked about the Jadeveon Clowney reminder that normal human beings don't play this sport, we said this off air. Just one of the very first thing I remember that I watching the game, I'll blurt out stuff. I'm like, oh, that guy was from this high school, or this guy did this, and like just stuff that I watched this game yesterday, 12 years later, sitting there with Allie on the couch, and they said, talking about the starting offensive line for LSU, and it was like Herman Brown. And I was like, that guy was the biggest baby ever born in the state of Louisiana. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah, he was 15 pounds, 14 ounces. And she's like, are you serious? And I was like, and so we look it up, and sure enough, he was like, I don't know how or why I remember that, but to this day, I still remember that.
See, that's one of those things that you say as like a little factoid while you're sitting with your significant other.
Yeah.
And then they say to you, but you can't remember like my mom's name or something like that. And then it's a tough look and you have to kind of walk that back.
Sorry, like, Margaret.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, the thing that you didn't know or remember. I say didn't know or remember until rewatching this game. Most of these things I didn't know, because if we're being 100% honest, so you provided the context of where you were when you're watching this game. I was a high school senior living in the Midwest who probably was hanging out with my girlfriend on a Saturday night. Sick brag, I had a high school girlfriend. What up? But I probably just saw highlights of this game and then have heard stuff since then. And then this was the first time that I probably went and watched this game from start to finish like this.
You're in the group that didn't realize that LSU wasn't good before Saban got there.
Okay, something like that. Yeah, something like that. But so I didn't, and so all my factoids are based on this, because during the time that I started watching college football, which is basically the 21st century.
Yeah.
And that I have memories from it. LSU has been good. LSU has been really good. And so I didn't realize until rewatching this that LSU had not been the number one team in America since 1959. Unbelievable. I went back and I looked that up again.
Connor, let me give you a fact real quick before you in 2001 when they upset Tennessee in the SEC championship game, it was the first time they were going to be in. It was the first time they'd won the SEC since 1986, and it was the first time they were going to make a New Year's Day bowl game since 1986.
I hear that. But if you're somebody like me who just knows kind of the macro view of LSU at the time, you're like, okay, well, they won a national championship already in the past. They won a national championship 4 years ago. And, oh, by the way, they had Nick Saban as their head coach. They were never number one in the AP poll.
That's crazy.
USC was number one in the AP poll after the 2003 season, and they had this rise to be able to get there. So just thinking about that and thinking about what this means for LSU, because we've seen, obviously, crazy LSU night games in the last 12 years where, it's a couple top 10 teams and you're like, all right, this is just kind of standard. This is Baton Rouge Saturday night. This is just kind of how it is.
Louisiana Saturday night.
There it is. Didn't realize also that this was the first time in a decade that that Florida and LSU played at Tiger Stadium at night. Why did they not play at night?
I don't know. I mean, that's always been a thing about how dominant they've been at night, and they brought that up on the broadcast about how what do you call it? He had
24 straight that they had won at home on Saturday night, and their last loss on Saturday night in Baton Rouge was to Bama in 2002.
Yeah, and this is, so it was cool too looking back at this. Like, this is at a time when LSU was so if you're coming into watching football at that exact time when Saban takes over for them in 2000 or 2001, and I think it was 2000. I'm pretty sure it's 2000. But when he takes over for them, and they're on the verge of a dynasty, and this is LSU has always had they've put up a fence around that state for recruits and get all the in-state talent. But this is back when you had some guys that from a national standpoint, like the Paraloo thing, and other guys that were big recruits everywhere. Like Xavier Carter. I remember Xavier Carter coming out. I thought he was going to be the best player ever in college football. It was like a dual threat guy, or I think they played receiver. But they were on one of the best programs in the country.
But you forget that. You forget watching for somebody like me, and I'm sure I don't have memories of LSU being bad. And I know that
I don't think LSU
weird.
fans have a memory of that either somehow.
I know. There's probably a lot who don't.
It's
kind of crazy to think. There are people in college right now who maybe grew up in the state of Louisiana who, this is their childhood, they look back at moments like this, and for me, that's like growing up with the 90s Bulls. That 6 of the first 8 years of my life I got to watch NBA win a championship. And so there are, for LSU fans who are currently going to college right now, these are kind of those glory days. And that's not to say that they haven't had glory moments in the 12 years since then. Obviously, they've had a ton of success, but you look back on those times and you forget that this come up that LSU was on, and it just in the 2000s decade and what this game kind of symbolized in the whole scheme of things.
And I think it's one of those things too, is there's a lot of programs that kind of forget. They think they have a better tradition-rich history than they necessarily do. But this is one of those that is it's better for the sport. I hate when people say it, but it's better for the sport when LSU is good, because they're it's such a cool, awesome atmosphere, and the fans are so passionate. It's very, I don't want to say it's unlike anything else in college football, but it's pretty close to it.
I don't even know what LSU would look like, what Tiger Stadium would look like if it was half full.
Is that a thing?
Bad thought to have?
I don't even know. The only time I've ever seen it have less than 92,000 drunk people in it is those pictures of Devin White on Daisy May.
Oh yeah, shout out Daisy
R.I.P.
May. Oh, rest in peace, man. That's tough. A little too soon for that one. A little too soon. Did you have anything else for the thing you didn't remember, know until rewatching this?
I forgot about how talented both sides were, and I initially put down Florida's team about how talented they were. Because this was the first domino to fall. This recruiting class with Tebow and Brandon Spikes and all this, that was the first domino to fall to make sure Saban came to Bama. Because Mike Shula, there was a couple guys that were apparently on the fence. The Bama fans felt like they had a really good chance at getting in these recruiting classes with Spikes, and A.J. Jones is one of them, and then obviously Tebow. But I think more than anything, I forgot how some of these recruiting classes that LSU had were just incredible, man. Just early to set. Those were guys that were, when you look at these old Forrest Davis recruiting annuals, the number one player in the Southeast coming out, and they're going to LSU consistently.
It is crazy to think about that, and then also to think about the offense that LSU played with. That was just basically like a Wisconsin offense.
Oh my God, it was so they were so talented, but it was so frustrating to watch.
Okay, Florida earmuffs, because this is tough. When did the losing team blow it? There are some key points in this, because Yes, you could easily just say, okay, I thought Florida was going to get a goal line stand before Hester had the game-winning touchdown. You can point to that. That's too easy for me. I look at Florida having the ball up 24-14, and then they turn the ball over on consecutive possessions. Terrible. Cannot do that when you got number one on the ropes. You're on the road like that. You got a chance to put them away.
And you've lost the week before.
A field goal.
You're right. You're getting right back into the national championship picture.
Yep.
And everyone named Mama has lost this week. Florida. I don't know. That doesn't factor into your play calling, but yeah, you know what? Maybe just put the game away. And with this kind of talented team, they should have been able to do that. And that's not to discredit LSU, but yeah.
So they had the fumble. Florida has the fumble. I can't remember. Was it? I can't remember the tailback who fumbled, but
it's either Moody or Moore, I think.
Yeah, and they cough it up, and then LSU goes on a long drive, and then comes up without points. So it's okay, Florida's good. Florida's still up 10, and then Tebow throws the ball off Cornelius Ingram's head. And they get the pick, and then it's
Spiral,
okay, now it's time for LSU. Then that turns into the touchdown drive, and they make it a one-score game after that. But to me, there are some. So you could point to that, and Florida fans are going to say that them blowing it was Urban not calling timeout when LSU was about to score with 90 seconds left, because he essentially wasted 19 seconds they could have had for that last drive, and that's what's easy to forget about that. After Hester scores a touchdown, they only had 1:09 left, which for that offense, the way that it wants to move, that's not necessarily ideal. That's not Tebow's main thing.
Yeah.
It's not going to break off 25-yard chunks. He's just not that guy. So they could have had 1:38 left on the clock, and with first downs the way that they are in college football, with the clock stoppage and all that, they would have had a much better chance. Instead, they kind of are left with just the Hail Mary at the end, which actually looks like a pretty good ball, all things considered.
So here's the thing. And this kind of goes back to maybe what I forgot about LSU's offense, but the painstakingly methodical style of football that LSU played on offense, where they were these are these drives, okay? LSU at one point had a 7-play drive that lasted 3 minutes and 23 seconds, and that was ended in a punt. But after that, 16 plays, 80 yards, 7.5 minutes off the clock. Let's see. Second half, you have where's that? 15 plays, 80 yards, 8 minutes and 11 seconds off the clock. 15 plays, 70 yards, 7 minutes off the clock. They were able to control the time of possession in this game so much. It was the game was lost for me. It was in the late and third quarter. It's not just because of the turnovers. I mean, it had something to do with it, but just being the halftime adjustments, I guess, and the way that the fourth quarter was played was LSU was the tougher team and the better team.
And they had more gas left at the end.
44 yards of offense. And think about what this Florida offense was doing in the first half.
That was another reason why a lot of Florida fans will say, why did Urban not call a timeout there? Because LSU was just on the field for basically the entire fourth quarter, it felt like.
Dude,
you need to give them a break in that moment, and for them to waste those 19 seconds. And then to call the timeout afterwards, where he basically, it was like you wanted to see him set up and then call the timeout, was just not the best look for Urban.
So they had 314 total yards of offense in this game. Florida did, right? And I don't know the exact number, but it was around 180 yards of it was in the first half on 3 possessions. They were up 17-7 going in the half. They had 3 total possessions outside of the one where they took a knee in the half. That's ridiculous.
Baffling to think about the way that this game played out and that LSU was able to pull off the comeback in the fashion that it did. What would have happened afterwards if the result was flipped? So let's say Florida holds on to the lead. Hester is stopped at the goal line. Maybe it's another Joe Hayden tackle or something like that. So you brought it up earlier. The quote that Danielson's had where, Les Miles is converting all these fourth downs, and he's like, Nick Saban who if Les wins this game? And he did say that afterwards. So LSU could have lost this game, and theoretically, they theoretically could have still, they lost this game and still would have had a chance at the national championship, obviously, because they still technically would have had another loss to give.
I think they still would have won it.
Yeah, I mean, they probably still would have won it. Now, we're also saying that LSU would have not had 3 losses and they would have only had 2. But here, I think the more interesting thing is Florida. And I just thought about
Florida fell apart.
If Florida doesn't lose this game, are we talking about 3 straight Florida national titles?
No, we're not.
Okay, so here's initially when I threw this out there, when my brain went to that road, because Florida, of course, lost 2 games and they lost the bowl game to Michigan, obviously. So they would have had the 2 regular season losses. There would have been a 3-way tie atop the division with Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia. They would have all been 6-2 in the SEC had Florida won this game. But Florida would have won the tiebreaker, if I'm not mistaken, and then they would have had a rematch with LSU in the SEC championship.
I mean, yeah, I don't think they were. I don't think they would have. Florida wasn't that good that year.
Florida wasn't that good, though. That's
the bottom.
thing.
And I saw you put that in notes, and I'm not trying to say it in a bad way, but like, if anything, LSU, if they lose this game, they don't lose the rematch. First off, it's hard to be a team twice, in my opinion.
True.
Georgia was better than Florida that year, and you could say, like, yeah, maybe they just caught them off guard because they felt they were reeling after the Auburn loss and this, but they shouldn't have lost to Auburn at home. They shouldn't have lost this game at home. They got embarrassed by Georgia, and that's at a time when Georgia didn't win that game very often, and so like if you're getting outcoached by Tommy Tuberville and outplayed by Brandon Cox at quarterback the week before here, and you can't put away a Matt Flynn led team at LSU when you're up 10 going in the fourth quarter. And then you also getting outcoached by Mark Richt. Yeah, you're not a good team. I think if they lose this game, here's a hot take for you: LSU doesn't lose another game, and LSU still wins the national championship.
Oh, so LSU would have been a 1-loss team.
Yeah, because I don't know what they lost the next week, and again, it's hard to get up back-to-back weeks or stuff like that. But if you're telling me they lose this game and then they have to get back into the title hunt, they're going to beat Kentucky. Okay, I know that was a good Kentucky team. Andre Whitson was a fantastic quarterback. They had a lot of talent on that team. They're not going to lose to Kentucky. I don't think they lose that 3 overtime game to Darren McFadden in Arkansas, which is one of the best games I've ever watched in my entire life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's. I don't think Florida wins the national championship. They were 9-4, dude.
Oh, I know. And in hindsight, it's you could. Tebow said coming into that year, he's like, he didn't say this at the time, but he said in hindsight, like looking back, I knew going into that season that we had a lot of issues. We were incredibly young. We had major issues on the defensive side of the ball, and there were just things that I knew I was going to have to do more than I typically did. And, of course, that ended up being his best statistical season because of all that he had to do. Here's another interesting Tebow question. Do we ever get the promise if Florida wins this game? Hear me out on this. Hear me out. The promise, of course, comes next season after the Ole Miss loss, where they lose that game at home. Tebow, with all things the way that it played out, Tebow, when he makes the promise, is only 12-5 as a starter at Florida, which is
really good,
bananas
really good
to think about because, of course, they were 9-4 in 2007. They start off 3-1 in 2008. Maybe there's not that same motivation because maybe if they are playing for an SEC championship or whatever it is, Tebow's a junior. He already won a national title as a freshman. He had just won the Heisman the year before, but he didn't have necessarily a team success that played out the way that it did. If they had even more team success, and they had, those first 2 years were just really, really good, is there that same level of urgency for Tebow where he's looking at that, he's thinking, man, I'm only 12-5 as a starter. His legacy is way different, obviously, what happened after that. But does he feel that sense of urgency in that moment if this 2007 season plays out differently? I don't know.
You're 12-5. You're a homeschooled kid. You're not mentally tough enough to have that kind of confidence. No, I don't know. I don't know if the promise is made or not. The 12-5 thing is a crazy stat. But
Isn't that, though?
this
I
2007 team, and I said this earlier about the Troy Smith thing with Ohio State in 2006. Darren McFadden was the best player in the country in 2006 from Arkansas. He might have been the best player in the conference in 2007, as you saw in that game where he was able to take over later in the year against LSU. But the reason why this team wasn't very good is because Urban Meyer was a one-trick pony the entire season. And the South Carolina game, Tebow has 7 touchdowns. Who cares? Like you're beating South Carolina. And it just, for me, it was one of those things where you could tell Urban, this offense was great. And Urban Meyer was a fantastic coach, and these were great teams at Florida and crazy talented. But to have that much talent and not figure out a way to utilize guys like Percy Harvin, to utilize guys like,
Lewis
Murphy, and I wouldn't say Nelson, but like just like
Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah, but they had guys. They had so much talent on this team, and you can't find a way to piece that together. Where like again, this they were in this game. They could have won this game, and they were a very talented team. And I know it says 9-4. It looks worse because they have a bowl loss to Michigan. Mm-hmm. However, if you are losing games at home to Auburn the week before, and Auburn was a top 15 team, but it's Tommy Tuberville, dude. You have the talent. You have the talent to beat these teams. You're not capable of doing it because of the way you're coaching. He still outcoached Les Miles.
It is interesting though, considering the high stakes that were at this game and what could have changed, and maybe with LSU too. Because I don't think it changes that much for LSU. Now, if we're talking about LSU being a 3-loss team and they don't make a national championship, that's more interesting when you sit here and try and talk about Les, because obviously this is his title season, and he's able to make it to the 2016 season. But if that was still a thing that's hanging over him, it's different. And 2007's changed the narrative with him in the post-Saban era that we talked about before. And what happens if LSU doesn't win that title, and the angst that they feel, it just feeling like Saban just has their number even more than he actually did.
Right. And just to be clear, because I know I might be contradicting myself here when I say that, like, they weren't the LSU, I don't think was the best team at the end of that season, because I thought Georgia and USC were, the way they were beating teams. But what I will say is, and that USC team, man, with like Mark Sanchez and who was Dwayne Jarrett, I think it was the receiver, and Ray Maluga at linebacker, like, they were really good. The thing with LSU, I think here is I don't think there's as much controversy late, because again, they don't lose to Kentucky. Point. They don't have that blemish on the resume, because no offense, Kentucky fans, but it's still not, even if they're a top 20 team, it still looks bad if you're losing to Kentucky. So I wonder what happens after that.
Just a wild 2007. The sliding doors are nuts. It's absolutely crazy. The Rich Rod stuff. If West Virginia wins that final game and they make it to a national championship, like a lot of different things.
Pat White, dude. Who was the running back? Was it Noel Devine?
Steve Slayton.
But Noel Devine was on that team, right?
Slayton's the one that I remember from that group.
Noel Devine was he has the best high school highlight film I've ever seen in my life. Anyway,
the last thing that we'll close out with, because I botched this horribly last time, as you pointed out, the play or image that we'll always remember when thinking of this game. What is it for you?
Now I feel like I've just like piled on Les Miles, but it's for me. It's definitely the 5 for 5. Like that just made me hungry. The 5 for 5 thing with Les Miles talking about how he goes for 4th down all 5 times and he converts it. Because what ended up happening was you had this thing with Saban, with LSU fans, that was like, they knew they had their coach. Like, this guy, he got it. Like, he was able to resurrect this program, and he was a great football coach. Les Miles, it felt like they were always having to talk themselves into it for a while. Like they had to like talk themselves into him being a good coach. For me, it's just that look. I feel like every single time we ever saw Les Miles on the sideline at LSU, he would look on the field and then he'd be looking up in confusion at the scoreboard, like the play clock. Every single time they panned to him. That was my biggest takeaway.
Do you think that the way that this played out, where LSU has games like this where they really did play a lot of smash mouth football to be able to come back in this game, and thinking that this style and the way that they could do this, and it didn't matter that they didn't have this All-American at quarterback, and they still won a national title with somebody like Matt Flynn. Like, how much do you think that plagued them in the 2010s as offenses changed ahead of the times? And nobody was calling LSU a modern offense. We're finally getting to the point now where LSU is talking about RPOs, and the way that this made them believe we can line up with anybody in the country,
no matter what,
and just be able to beat them.
Yeah, and that's a really good point.
Like this. It's interesting looking back and wondering how big of a factor this played, and them saying, you know what, we've done this before. If we get the right pieces together, this is our style, this is our brand of football, this is how we feel like we're going to get to that level of dominance. And of course, after 2007, they weren't quite able to get to that top of the college football mountain. Obviously, 2011 happened, but just a totally different way that things developed.
I almost wonder if they think that like the way they ran this system, because you have Matt Flynn, who's just like your legend, leading them to the national championship that year. But then you have your backup, who's the athletic quarterback that can run the option, with Ryan Perrilloux. And like that combination was able to, however way they used it and how it ended up working out, for a national championship. You wonder if the 2011 thing where it's like, you know what, I don't know if we should put in Jarrett Lee or if we should put in Justin Jefferson. And they ran the option more than they should have with Justin Jefferson. So yeah, I wonder how that played into it.
Yeah, just wild to think about all the things that could have happened with LSU and the post. I guess really, throughout the Les Miles era, it's just a fascinating team to look at, and the close moments. But this moment obviously was one.
I think it worked out for the best. It worked out. Yeah, I love the fact they have Coach O, and I think they're in a better place now.
Amen. Peak SEC, as I said at the top. This game was just so peak SEC. What I'll remember most is Jacob Hester laying in the end zone right there. That shot at the end. Just kind of a perfect moment to kind of encompass like what a grind this game really was and how hard fought it was to be able to kind of get to that point.
How about, actually, those are the things I forgot about. How about Florida only had 2 players drafted in the NFL draft this year? How is that possible?
Holy cow,
that just shows you how young they were. It says it on their Wikipedia page. I'm looking at it right now. But I had to do a double take last night. I was like, wait, what? Like,
what?
Yeah, I guess because they were so young, but like, yeah, I don't know.
And it's funny because we always think of Urban Meyer as pretty much everywhere that he's been. He just reloads. And even that 2010 team, it wasn't a lack of talent on that group that plagued Florida necessarily. But you look back at this year that was just sort of odd for Florida in what was peak Tebow, peak Urban, and we kind of forget. I tend to forget of like the struggles that they had in some of these close games and just kind of how they were able to not quite get over the hump, and they didn't have these championship ingredients that the teams that sandwiched that season obviously did.
Yeah, no, agreed. They were God, they were young. God, they were really so young. Really young. So
what should we do? This was fun. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to do this. What should we do for our next one? And when is our next one going to be? That's an interesting question.
Next week or the week after. I think. Well, no, it's not going to be next week because next week on Friday I will be in Las Vegas for my bachelor party. But I don't know. We need to figure that out because like I've been watching a bunch of these, and it's been like the Tennessee Florida stuff is always great. I would love to do one of those. We should probably do one that Florida wins because I feel bad for how this has gone. But yeah, there's. I'm trying to think of what should be next. We'll have to think of something. Maybe that
we'll workshop it. We'll throw it out on the Facebook group. That's another reminder. Please join our Facebook group if you have not done so. The Saturday Down South podcast on Facebook. We kind of previewed, we teased these things, and we like getting your feedback. It's always interesting, kind of hearing the way that fans react to this. Some of which, some fan bases can look back and it's the success that they had, it makes it a little bit easier to digest a loss. We talked about that with Georgia fans and how, the Richt thing kind of led to Kirby, but at the same time, I realize this is a little bit of a painful memory for at least some of you.
For Florida fans? Oh, bite me. They won the national championship the year after this, so I don't even want to hear it. Also, what we should do next is the Auburn-Mississippi State game from 2008. They won 3-2.
Ooh.
3-2.
Oh, that'd be a really good one. So, a little peel behind the onion here. I've been trying to get Tommy Tuberville on the pod for a while. A long time. Would love some input from him about that. That would have been what? Mullen was.
No, he was gone.
Mississippi State in 2009.
Oh, yeah, so it was his last year at Auburn.
Yeah, it was Tuberville's last year. That'd be a good one to look back on. We haven't decided yet. We'll throw it out on the Facebook group, and 2 weeks I think from now is going to be the plan. I think that's going to be our last one before the season starts. I think maybe that's the plan, and then we'll re-up again in the off season. But hopefully people are enjoying this. Hopefully this provided you some entertainment on a road trip maybe or something like that. We're just getting through the off season one day at a time, friends. One day at a time.
That's right.
Coach O, this was before your time at LSU, but I know that you were watching this game from across the country and feeling very fondly of it.
I'm proud of Tiger anytime they win that game. So, go Tigers.
Talk to you guys next week.